All right, welcome devs, and today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make this really cool GitHub README for your profiles. As you can see, we have a few cool typing animations, some good-looking social buttons, as well as dark-themed icons for languages, frameworks, and tools, and a contribution snake animation. Let's just wait for it to restart here. It just looks really sick, as well as some stats from our own GitHubs and a bottom typing animation. So yeah, let's just get to it. So first of all, you might be wondering, why bother making a cool GitHub README? So a GitHub README is the first point of contact between other coders and you, and it shows up in the main page of your profile, as you can see here. And if you're in a situation where you're job hunting, like myself, having a cool GitHub README could potentially help you differentiate from the rest of the folks out there. And regardless if it helps you getting a job or not, come on, it just looks really cool, right? So so let's just get to it. Oh, and just a quick summary. Apart from showing you how to make this cool GitHub README, I will also give a quick introduction to styling in Markdown files and GitHub Actions. In case you're wondering why we need GitHub Actions, we need it to generate this snake animation on a push event or every 12 hours. So yeah, without further ado, let's just get to it. So to make sure that a GitHub README shows up in the main page of your profile, you need to create a repository named exactly as your username. So in my case, my username is SalSpeed07. I have a GitHub repository named SalSpeed07, exactly the same. And the readme.md file inside this repo will show up in the main page of my profile. And the same is worth for you if you just name the repository as the same as your username. So one thing worth mentioning is that if you don't want to follow along with the video, you can just go to github.com/solidSpeed07/solidSpeed07 and open the instructions.md file. I have it pretty well documented everything you need to do in order to customize this a README, uh, and as well as all the repos that I use, the open source repos where we use to make API calls to make pretty much everything that you see that looks good in here, like this typing animation, these social buttons, and the start themed icons, everything that looks good. It's pretty much an API call to open source GitHub repos that allows us to style this and make it look cool. So yeah, but those of you who want to follow along, let's just get to it. So I'm going to open this readme.md file. In your case, you're going to want to make a repository and name it exactly as your username. I'm not going to do that because I don't want to delete it. And so the first thing that we have in here is a visitor badge, as we can see right here. And it's not super fair because, I mean, if you just refresh it, it'll count as a visit, but still, it's something and it looks kind of cool. So let's just put it in here. We'll start by making an img tag, just as in HTML. And we can't really use any CSS and GitHub Markdown files, so we will resort to pretty much using the align attribute in HTML tags. Um, and in this case, we want to align it to the right. And also, it's worth noting that if you are just doing the align like straight from the img tag, it only works for right and left. It doesn't work for center. If you want to center an img tag, you need to have a div and align the div to center and have the img inside the div. But in this case, we just want to align it to the right. So, and we'll make the source this URL here, which, I mean, I'm just not gonna not gonna say it out loud. And the first thing that we had, let me just zoom this in, and we have these query parameters. That what is important here is page ID equals your username dot your repo name, which should be the same if you want to have a GitHub README. And yeah, that's it for the visitor badge. Okay, so next off we have a typing SVG, which is what we see here. And this is actually pretty simple to set up. But as I mentioned before, we can't have a plain IMG tag and align it to the center because it will not work. So we just need to have an outer element. In this case, I have an H1, but you can make this a div or whatever you want. And then you align it to the center and you have the IMG inside. It doesn't need to align anywhere. And yeah, and then we use the SRC property and we will use HTTPS readme typing SVG, the Heroku app, and we have a few query parameters here. The first one is a font, which is font family of righteous, a size of 35, center true, v center of true, which is like horizontally and vertically, um, a width of 500, a height of 700, and what's really important here is the lines and duration. So the lines, you can specify the first section of your typing SVG. So the first, as you can see here, like first it shows up hi there, and then page Readme. So I have the first portion of the line here, hi there, and then a semicolon, and then the rest of the uh, the sentence. And make sure to space the words with a plus icon to make sure it works. And this duration here pretty much is milliseconds. So 4 seconds will take each part of the animation. So this hi there, the total of the typing and the backspacing will total 4 seconds, and the same is worth for the second sentence. So yeah, let's just move along to the third section, which is just um, this bio with some social icons. And yeah, so there's not really much going on in this bio section. I just have an H3 tag. In case you don't know, H1 is a bigger heading, H2 is a little smaller than that, and H3 is a little smaller than that. And we have a BR, which is a line break, and I have a div here where I align the text to the center. It's where you can see all this here. And yeah, make sure to give it this line break, because if I remove it, you'll see that it'll kind of screw up the alignment. So make sure to, this is not really HTML, this is Markdown. So yeah, make sure to have this line break in there, and it'll show up well centered, and each sentence in its own line. And yeah, then we're off to these social buttons, which are also rendered through API calls. Okay, so first off, we have a div here where we align everything to the center. So like this row of buttons will be aligned to the center, and we will make sure to surround those buttons with an A tag so that we actually have some functionality when clicking on them. A stands for anchor, and we want to customize this to your email. So in this case, I have an href here, and mail to and my email, so that when this Gmail is clicked, the email app will be opened. And you probably couldn't see that because I'm just screen sharing my Chrome tab, but when you click on that, your email app will open up with you as a sender. And then we have an img tag, which will actually be the visual button that we have here. So yeah, we make an API call to img.shields.io, and then we have /badge, and then we have this is the uh, Gmail is the label that we have in here. So Gmail, the label, and then the color that we want the background of the button. These two separated with a dash, and then question mark, and the first query parameter will be style. We want that to be for the badge, which you can look at the documentation. I will leave all the links in the description as well. But yeah, this will just make sure that it looks like this. And we also have a logo of Gmail. So they have a bunch of preset logos that you can use. I'll also leave the link in the description, so you can just like search up whatever social icons you want to put in there. And then we have a logo color of red, so you can pretty much specify whatever you want. This small M here is red. And I also had this target underline blank, but I just realized that it does not work. So yeah, it just opens it up in the current tab. So yeah, it doesn't really work. So you can just leave that off and remove that if you fork it. And for the second one, I have a LinkedIn icon, and the same thing, shields.io /badge/LinkedIn, which is the label that we'll see. And this is the hex code. I don't know if I mentioned before, but this is the hex code of the background color that we see. So this is a shade of blue, which is what we see here on the LinkedIn. And we also have the logo color of white, which is the logo color that we see here. And yeah, as I said, this target.blank doesn't work, so I'll just remove it from everywhere. It doesn't really matter. And yeah, also have this portfolio one that I used. Same thing. So but in this case, I made it the label portfolio. Style is still for the badge, but then the thing is, I didn't. There wasn't really a logo for kind of like a browser icon, internet. So I just kind of improvised with a logo of this company that I've never heard of before, which is called Todoist, and it kind of looks like a a resume or a paper. So I just kind of thought it looked cool, so I left it as the logo of Todoist. And color of white, as I said, target blank doesn't matter. A few other options for the portfolio icon that I had here, like SQLite, Safari, and Chrome, are pretty good as well. And that's it for the social icon section. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, so next off we have languages, frameworks, and tools, which is where we have these cool dark themed icons right here. And it's actually really simple. And I also have a quick H2 tag here, align to the center, and a line break. And then another div where align to the center, and then all the IMG tags will be center aligned, as we see here. And it's really simple. All you need to make sure is to have add a src attribute, and this will make an API call to skillIcons.dev/icons and question mark. And then we start with the query parameters. And the query parameter, actually, there's one query parameter. It's just I, which will stand for all the icons that we'll use. And I'll also put a link in the description for this, so you can look on the documentation. They have a bunch of icons in there, and you can just like search up if you have some other tools that I don't have in here. You can just actually you could just type it and see if it works. It'll probably work because they have a lot of icons in there. So yeah, you just pretty much list them after the I parameter with a comma between them. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I also have a line break, and they also have a parameter, query parameter to um, specify how many icons you want in each row. But I made two I tags because I wanted to have this kind of like ladder effect here, where like we have less icons on the top, so that wouldn't be possible by using that query parameter. Okay, so next off we have our contribution snake animation, which is by far the coolest thing about this README, and it's based on my own contribution. So it updates every 12 hours to generate a new animation based on the current contribution grid. And yeah, we'll do that through GitHub Actions. And yeah, as you can see, it's the same here. And yeah, let me just quickly go over the markdown first. So we just have a div and align the items inside to the center. We have an H2 here with my contributions, a line break, and an IMG tag with an alt attributes, which is essentially a description of the image. Try to have that in all your IMG tags. I'm kind of guilty of not doing it, but it's important for accessibility. And then we have a src attribute here, and it will point to our own. Where am I? It will point to our own GitHub repos within the output branch and a file named GitHub contributions grid snake svg, which will generate through GitHub Actions. So without further ado, let's just dive into GitHub Actions. And what actions are essentially a way for us to um, automate certain actions, pretty much, which will run based on certain events in our repository. So we can define our workflows, which are essentially a piece of code that will run whenever we whenever a certain action that happens in the repository. And inside that, we can have a .yml file, and you can name this whatever you want. I named it main. But yeah, and then inside we have this kind of weird syntax, kind of like resembles a bit of JSON mixed with Python. But yeah, so first of all, we have the name of our GitHub action, and this is visible through our Actions tab up here. So I named it Generate Snake, and it's the same one up here. Okay, so moving on, with this on key here, we can define when our workflow will run. So I made it so that it runs every 12 hours. You can change this to up to 6 hours, I think. So we're on like 4 times a day, but I think 12 hours is enough. So just leave it as 12 there. And this workflow dispatch here will essentially allow us to manually trigger the workflow through the Actions tab here. So if I come here to the Actions tab and click on Generate Snake, I have an option to run the workflow manually. So this is what this workflow dispatch does here. And it will also run on a push to the main branch. So yeah, so if we have a push to the main branch, it'll run again. And inside this, there's this workflow, we can define a sequence of jobs. So a job is essentially a sequence of steps that will run in a GitHub runner. In case you don't know what a runner is, it's essentially a virtual machine that comes with some stuff pre-installed and runs on GitHub servers. So Yeah, so I just made one job for this because it's not necessary to have more than one. But if you have a more complex workflow and like um, you need certain parts of your workflow to run on a different operating system, then you can have multiple jobs, and each job can run on a different operating system. But in this case, it'll just run on Ubuntu latest, which is Linux. So yeah, and then we can define the steps in our job. And first thing we need to do is name our step. And the first step we'll have is clone our repo. So we'll clone our repo to the runner using a GitHub action, which is actions/checkout at v3. And GitHub action is essentially a predefined piece of code. Think of it as a open source GitHub repo, but it's actually an action. So it's just like some predefined code that we use to clone it to our runner, which because it's not as simple as just git clone when you're using a runner. So this just makes it easier for us to work with our repository. Okay, so next off, we have another step here, which I named generate the snake files and the dist directory. And it uses a GitHub action called platon/snk at v2. And yeah, Platon is actually the owner of the repo, so kudos to him for making this snake animation that we can use. This ID attribute, I'm honestly not sure what this does, but I think it's not really important for the context of this workflow. I'm not sure. I think it's not important. And then we have this width attribute, which is essentially used for defining some environment variables or input variables that we'll use in our GitHub action. So in this case, we have our GitHub username, which is where the action will fetch the contribution grid from, and we have this outputs as well, which is this is all defined in as the Platon/snk repo, which I will also put a link in the description. And also, one thing you can notice here is that some of these outputs are customizable. So the this last one here, um, there are a few query parameters. So you can specify the color of the snake. You can the color of the dots, and pretty much you can customize everything. But honestly, I feel like the regular one looks pretty good, so I didn't bother to change it. But just know that you can, and you can look at their repo if you want to. Next off, I have a step here for showing the build status, and this can be useful for debugging sometimes. So yeah, it just runs git status in the command line. And our last step is to push the new files to the output branch. And we'll use a GitHub action from crazymax/ghaction-github pages at v3.1.0. And this is, as you can probably imagine, I think this was probably made with GitHub pages in mind, but it can also just be used for pushing the changes that you have on the runner to the actual repo. So it just makes our life way easier, and we can use it as well. And we can also, with the width attributes, we can specify a few parameters. And the first one is the target branch, which is output. And we can see this through, if we go to our code here and change to the output branch, we have all the snake files in here. So yeah, going back to the GitHub workflow, we also have a build directory of dist. So it will essentially grab the changes from the dist directory, which is where we generated the snake files. And we have a commit message, which I set up as update snake animations. And we also have an environment variable. And we also have an env attribute here, which we just use our GitHub token. We don't need to set this up. This is automatic, but I believe it's just used to make sure that the action has access to all our contributions. Yeah, and this is pretty much it for this GitHub workflow. And also, just to take a look at all we went through, we can go to the Actions tab and um, choose one action that has already happened, and we can see pretty much all the steps that we found in there. So clone repo and generate files in this directory, show build status. So everything that we have in there just shows up here as a different step. And if you can't see anything in there, just make sure to make a commit. And also, one thing that I forgot to mention is that you need to come to your settings, actions, general, and you need to give in the workflow permissions. You need to give read and write permissions. This will essentially allow the GitHub workflow that we just went through to create those files in the this directory and push to our actual repo. Okay, so the only thing that we have left pretty much is our stats, which we'll use actually two repos to grab from. One is GitHub Streak Stats, and the other one is just GitHub README Stats. And yeah, so the Streak Stats has a bunch of configuration, but I just recommend that you have the count private true and theme react border radius 10. It just makes it look real nice here. As you can see, it's this one on the left, and it shows the total contributions, our current streak, so how many days in a row you've had commits to GitHub, and the longest streak you had since you joined GitHub. Okay, so and the next one that we have up here is just GitHub README stats, and there are actually two. One is for the top used languages, and the other one is for just stats. And I'll go over the query parameters real quick. So and these two, actually, if you fork the repo, you're gonna remove this dash solid-sp07 here because I had to run my own instance of the public repo to make sure that I had access the to my private commits. So you should probably do the same. And if you are getting the latest version, you're probably gonna want to remove this count private equals true here because I'm almost sure that they removed it from the most current version of the repo. So yeah, a few other query parameters I have here is show icons true, which is essentially these icons right here. We also have a theme of React, um, a rank icon here. So if I didn't have this rank icon equals GitHub, we would probably see a B here, but like B is not very good. So you can have B, A, and S, I believe, but B is like the worst you can have. So if you're like me, you're probably just gonna want to have this icon here. Unless you're an S, then you can remove the GitHub. And I also put a border radius of 10. And last off, we have an IMG with a width of 325, a line of center. I think this align center is not really necessary, and an SRC of GitHub README stats. Make sure to remove this dash solid-sp07 here. And we have a API/top lengths down here. And the query parameters are your username. You can hide whatever languages you want. I didn't want to show HTML in there. Lengths count, you can choose the maximum number of languages that will show up here. So if you have like 20 languages, you can just like make a max of 8 here. A layout of compact, I thought that was the best looking one they had. And theme of React, a border radius of 10. Size weights, so these weights here are essentially how the top languages are calculated. I recommend that you use 0.5 and 0.5, and this will kind of even it out the weights by like looking at like how many repos you have using that language and how many lines of code or characters. I'm not sure how they're calculated, but it just like makes it more realistic in my opinion. And I excluded a repo because since I'm running my own instance of the repo, like I mentioned before, I'm excluding GitHub README stats because it's kind of like a fork. So it's not really my code, so I excluded it. Okay, and lastly, we just have a few line breaks here, a divider, and an H3 with a line to center, and an IMG tag, which is using the same README typing SVG as we used up there. So I won't really go over the parameters again, but you get the gist. And yeah, I believe we are all set. If you followed along, you probably have something similar to this, which looks pretty awesome. And yeah, congratulations. I hope you enjoyed the video. Try to customize it, maybe put a bio in here, and just search up on those repos that I'll put in the description. Uh, Sometimes those repos have a panel where people show off their GitHub README, so you can just like go there for inspiration if you want to. And make sure to leave a comment with a link to your README so I can take a look. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to leave some feedback, good or bad, any ideas for future videos. And I believe that's it. I will see you all in the next one.